Hello. Great, great morning, great afternoon, great evening, wherever this conversation finds you. I am Travis Gray. Today we are transforming with our guest, Dr. Stuart Sovatsky. He has been a president of the Association of Transpersonal Psychology from 1994 to 2016. He has been a professor at CIAS. He has over 50 years of experience in the Indian spirituality with Kundalini, has many published works. You might be familiar with a book that was required reading for some of us transpersonal students called Words of the Soul. He has a book that is out right now called Awakened Advanced Spiritual Intimacy. He also has a featured chapter recently in a book called Equality and Reconciliation. Thank you, Dr. Stewart, for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. How are you?
Great, great. Yeah, thanks for reaching out. It's we had a little chat before this. I was glad to reflect back to you my admiration for all you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Like I briefly mentioned, I just feel like I'm taking on a torch with a bunch of my fellow colleagues, young transpersonal psychologists, taking on a torch, the kind of the third generation of transpersonal psychology, it seems to me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what we can do in the field. And it's thanks to professionals like yourself that have allowed us to I see what you're a part of seems to me as the second generation of transpersonal psychology, and I think that has given us more the methodological aspects of transpersonal psychology that are fundamental, just absolutely necessary for it to be a rigorous field. The first kind of founding father generation sort of gave us all of the aspirations of what the field could be and what it can transform into, and then the second generation, sort of a motherly generation, gave us the methods, gave us the tools, and now we are the children carrying on the torch, trying to figure out what we can do to heal the world that we're in right now. Really needs a lot of the healing and a lot of the love that you often speak about. Where did your transpersonal journey begin?
Um, I'm going to answer it in a slightly different way than usual, but I think it began in high school because I graduated in 1967, and
Mhm.
my school in Rochester happened to be one of the first to be racially integrated uh, in the North. And I think at that young age, 16, 17, I wasn't like cognizant of social pressures and change and all that. But suddenly, and I was president of my student body. So, I'm a young guy and I'm reading about things. But I took that up a bit, even though now I see it was pretty juvenile understanding of 16-year-olds understanding. But it introduced me to, the society is ever trying to improve itself. America is a work in progress.
Yeah.
And this Brown versus the Board of Education with 1954, now it's like, 10, 12, 15 years later, here we go. So I haven't answered that question this way before, but I think it sets the tone because it made me feel that when I did get into transpersonal psychology, and I'll tell you that stories in a minute, but by the time I got into it, I thought the goal was to work in the most difficult situations possible, or shouldn't say possible, that are out there, meaning prisons, people in homeless shelters that are lobotomized, suicidal situations where it's a very tense environment because you can't make mistakes, somebody could die, and homicidal, which I've had experience in all these areas, and really in psychotic, actively psychotic situations, which is more central. It's already been a bit explored in transpersonal, this kind of blurring the difference between mysticism and psychotic states. But I didn't care about which side the person was on. I just was looking for methods to help people that without medication, without hospitals. And frankly, I don't think I would be able to do it in today's climate. Today's climate is conservative, and now I think of myself with a lot of I don't know what to call it, some admiration, but also luck that I was able to do many things with, and then getting into family dysfunction and turning around lots of divorces. So when I listen to myself, what I just listed, these are topics that are generally not in the middle of the transpersonal concern for altered states. Although I directed the founding clinic ever for spiritual emergence, the Kundalini clinic, which was focused on these somewhat anomalous experiences. But what I saw was it was academic problem to is it mystical or is it psychotic. I really was confronted with helping people. I won't get into the details right now, but I'm trying to convey that, yeah, from high school on, I think I was attracted to helping where the need was the greatest, and to do it, since you mentioned the word love, to do it in ways that were um, involved a lot, frankly, of admiration and appreciation. And I'll finish with this last thing. What I found was, and Words from the Soul is a good example, that we talk a lot about the love, but we had very little research on this. For example, what a 10-minute compliment is even about, and how difficult the challenge is for someone to believe a 10-minute compliment, a client, let's say, or any of us. And likewise to let it in. And then if you do let it in, your life gets inspired. Now what? John Wellwood was a friend of mine, and he invented what I felt was a very problematic concept called bypassing. So you're always undermining people during their awakening. Well, what are you bypassing? And I said, John, people when they're awakening, they need to be helped to surpass themselves. And yeah, surely look at blind spots. But if you keep using the medical model and asking them what's wrong, you're going to take the wind out of their sails, and they're not going to get anywhere. So I don't do that. And he was not flabbergasted, because he was listening carefully. I remember it was in my living room where we had this chat, and he said, "Wow, that's not good." And I said, "Yeah, I don't, I just we're friends, and I've been dealing with it because I run this Kundalini clinic. I get a lot of these awakening people, and I see what that does. They come in looking for therapy to undo their awakening, but when they really need." Yeah, and what does that? I mean, if you take it a little further, it's not that simple to take your awakening further into the world. That's what I did. I had different types of awakening in college since then, and only thing I saw was suffering, and that I should do something about it, and I should go where it's the most dangerous, and I should have confidence in methods that are outside of the standard protocols of medication, or incarceration, or arrest, or hospitalization. This is what everybody is trained to do for the kind of problems I just listed, or divorce for that matter. You meet a couple, they're not doing well. Yeah, I was trained to help them separate, or, find their truth, which is always divorce, not unconditional love.
Yeah.
But what I did, and that book is about more than 20 years old by now. But so is really map out this subtle phenomenology of people believing not just my compliments, but couples and families, married couples. And I mean, right after an affair is discovered. This is not, lightweight situations. And how my admiration of them, which I had to break the rule. I had to be pro-love and not be neutral. And then I have to watch for their little shows, little tear shows. And I'd say, oh, that's because of the compliment you just gave her.
Mhm.
And lights up. Wow, I had an impact.
Yeah.
And then they say, yes, you had an impact. And then that person cries a little bit. And then I say, look, you just let it in a little bit and look at the effect that it has on your partner because they want to have impact.
Yeah.
And then they say, we never did any of this. We've been to 10 or 12 different couples counselors. No one, and I multiply this by 5,000 couples, no one, zero couples have been in a therapy that mentored them through that micro level of exchanging a positive sentence. And then you find out people get shy and you have to keep helping them. And eventually, in that scenario, you have to help them have a lifelong love and unbreakable, unconditional love, become better parents, solve all their problems with them, help them to learn methods of active listening and so on. But I'm just highlighting, yeah, there's zero interest, and I still can say it. I still look for books, zero interest on the subtle phenomenology of, and a compliment is just the most mundane way to express love.
Yeah.
Gratitude, admiration, I love you. There's zero comprehension of what would fall under the next detailed of what the power of love is in therapy.
Yeah.
The blush, the quivering of the lip, the
Mm.
toe starts moving because people goes right down to their toes. I'm just sharing with you some details because they're all absent. In fact, they're pathologized.
Yeah.
I would show videos of myself doing this, and then I'd stop it and say, "What do you think I'm going to say next?" And the audience would say, "Well, you're going to ask about their buried pain."
Yeah.
I say, "Well, what I'm going to do is they're going to talk about how they just felt love because that's what we were just happening in the session." And then I would run the tape and play it. They wouldn't believe what they saw. So let me pause it at this point.
Yeah, well, thank you, Stuart. Yeah, it's fascinating how often people are not able to receive a compliment. Like I heard you the tear came out in the giving of the compliment, but the it seems to me like the receiving of that was maybe the hardest part. The saying words is sometimes it can be happen. Somebody can be pushed to say words, but then the actual receiving of that compliment as something genuine, something that causes that emotional reaction, causes like that emotional opening is a really beautiful thing. I love these parallels. Lately I've had these conversations with professionals, and we've gone into the work in incarcerated spaces. If anybody knows my story, when I was between ages 17 to 21, I was in and out of jail like twice a year, and so I had a lot of trouble with the law. And then eventually, when I was a master's degree of counseling psychology, I'm working with students or with young adolescents that are in teen domestic violence and family intervention programs. So they are perpetrators of violence, and they are in a court mandated program for 6 months. It often takes them longer than 6 months because they fail out of the program. They don't really want to be there. And I was able to identify with those clients because I've been on those kind of probationary court mandated sort of spaces. And then I also did a program with couples that were going through divorce. They were going through a custody battle kind of things. And so that program was called New Skills and Choices for Parents. And so it was really interesting that it was working with the co-parenting. But what I love about what you said about transpersonal psychology as a field, that these things are not always so central. But I think that it is very important that all of those altered states, all of those anomalous experiences, all of that is done is looked at in a practical way. It needs to be applicable to people's lives, and I'm very big on making the spirituality practical. And so I love that you highlighted that. We are in a more conservative time, and so it sounds like that is what led you into working with couples more often than the other things. Is that correct?
Um, I would say so. Yeah, because if someone can have a marriage or a relationship, they're more functional and than if they're not and they're really babbling and hallucinating and or talking about suicide, which I never stopped doing it,
Yeah.
but working. And on my last consultation was with a shooter, which was really right, just one of my most challenging.
Yeah.
And I only used admiration and gratitude. And he broke down in tears at the very end of the session,
And
saying, "Man,
and are you currently a practitioner? Are you currently a therapist and working in these capacities?
not really. I am a kind of an I'm an elder. I kind of giggle a little bit, but yeah, I've been given that title by a number of groups, Eurotas, the European Transpersonal, and a group in Texas that I lead things for. Uh, and I was doing it at a yoga community, but they folded during COVID.
So
So
it's
right now, yeah, I do a lot of
like you focus on the
podcasts
writing as well right now. Is that
to
true?
some degree. Yeah, I did write this chapter for Will Keepin that's coming out, that came out a couple of weeks ago. Um, but, it's writing is at this point in my life, I do have an open acquisition file with Harvard University Press, which is really a hard thing to not follow up on.
Mhm.
But it's equally challenging to look at a computer screen for 6 or 8 hours a day for 2 to 3 years to finish it. So, it would be the coup de grace of my career if in fact they acquired it as they
Yeah.
show interest. But that would be to get to the point you're getting at, is of it should be practical, because
Yeah.
transpersonal was secondary. To me, it was, does it work better? Does it work better than medication and incarceration and hospitalization? Because
Mhm.
that's when people throw their hands up about normal communication styles. I should say therapists.
Yeah.
They turn to medication because they can't get it, the progress through words alone or contact, or they call the cops or the 5150 because they have to get call in something heavier. So transpersonal to me just meant should be more powerful, more ethical, more at least less expensive
Yeah.
than these extraordinary means, and the results should be long lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to point out that for a lot of the audience is probably transpersonal students, and I want to point out that you said you had this appointment with Harvard Press, and that you said 8 to 9 hours a day for 2 to 3 years to get a publication completed, to get like a book out. I imagine that's the capacity that you're speaking of. So that's really important that students and just people in general are aware of the amount of effort that it takes to create to birth a project of adequate creation, like something that you really are proud of.
Truly. Yeah. And, I also had an ethic that 75% of what I should write should not have been said before. And what I find is in public publishing, publishers prefer if you say like 20% new and 80% what's already been said,
Mm,
if not even 90% what's already been said, because they're writing to an existing market. So, for example, Words from the Soul was heavily drawing from Wittgenstein.
mhm.
And although he was one of the greatest philosophers the last 100 years, uh, he changed the course of Western philosophy by focusing more on language. He has a very minimal role in psychotherapy. He should be central. He called his method of philosophy a form of psychotherapy. He studied and then rejected Freud. So he's a very interesting person, and I found him essential to changing people's cognitive frames. You know how they put their experience into words. But I'm just saying it as an example. Yeah, for my purposes, and that was very time consuming. And if I was wanting to introduce completely new material to our field, new sources, Wittgenstein was the most, I thought, uh, important to try to include. But even Martin Buber, who most people at least come across, that I thou is a wonderful approach, or Walt Whitman.
Uh,
Walt Whitman, probably the greatest American poet, who is all about combination of optimism and very complex moods relating to suffering and the Civil War. He's a genius, and I would want to teach a whole course on leaves of grass for therapists. So I wanted to expand and not just talk about, is meditation good for you? And is yoga good for you? This is how it's good for you. Although I have written a good deal about that too. But even there, I would look at not the yoga of today, which is strangely, I always like to say it, but it happens to be the fact that, all the what we call yoga and getting into poses
mhm,
was modeled after French ballet.
mm,
And now the scholars are catching up with me. I was one of the first to publish on this.
wow.
And people, they scratch their heads. They think I'm wrong because I'm saying, no, it was never done like that. In India, it was more like a charismatic. It was like, yeah, Kundalini, your body was shaking into different poses.
Mhm.
And you can't teach that like you can't teach labor contractions. It's a phenomenon of the body's awakening. So yeah, so I would try to introduce wherever I could.
Yeah.
It sounds controversial, except for 10, 20 years later, then it starts to become mainstream.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a tremendous feat to aim for 75% of unheard of material to expand that much. So difficult for young scholars in the dissertation phase, which is myself, to to write about things that are not already written. And it is a frustrating part of the writing process because everything needs to have this backed citation, and it's tough to be able to be free, to just be liberated in your writing during this exercise of completing a dissertation. I think that that's tremendously difficult also to put in 75% of your to aim for that of new writing. 75%, that's really incredible. And your writing has been very impactful to a lot of people. Dr. Stephen Schmitz really spoke highly about the words of the soul. Can you tell us a little bit more about this book, Advanced Spiritual Intimacy?
Well, it's a big topic, of course. The whole, it's 300 pages, but let me stay with start with Michel Foucault.
Okay.
Michel Foucault, in the intellectual academic world is a big deal. He's famous and so on.
Mhm.
But in transpersonal, he's not that critical. So, advanced spiritual intimacy, I took one of his key concepts called ars erotica.
Mhm.
For example, he was, in my opinion, the first Westerner to see that what Freud and the last really 50, 75 years of psychosexual theory and cultural transformation, they called it liberation. They
Mhm.
called it a sexual liberation. And Foucault, who's number one, gay, number two, a pretty libertine guy. He's not a Catholic. He's not a member of a right wing group in any way, but he was able to critique that liberation. And really, his brilliance was to say, we've just been launched on another compulsive way of life. Instead of compelled to watch our sexual feelings and not act on them, now we're being told we have to watch them and act on them.
Mhm.
And then he said, which is really brilliant, anybody could make a critique, but then he took a look at other world cultures, India, China, Japan, Islamic cultures. He didn't look at indigenous, but I think he would have if he knew more. And he saw that these were forms of societies where eros was not subjected to a concept of repression and expression, or right and wrong, or moral and immoral. That's the Western history.
Mhm.
And Tantra is an example, or Hatha Yoga for that matter, Kundalini, energetic yoga. They were not looking for, is this, we're going to unrepress ourselves. In fact, even the medical model, which sadly is definitely a big part of transpersonal way of looking at Kundalini, that I've combated my whole career. When you look at it medically, you're already going to undermine the awakened person. Yeah, I ran the Kundalini clinic,
Yeah.
which was an emergent service in the world for a long time. And so I would revere my clients. I wouldn't ask them what symptoms were they feeling. They would want to talk about it, and I would say, no, you've been medicalized already. So this ars erotica, which was Foucault's other category, is, yeah, you don't medicalize. The first category he called scientia sexualis, and that included the church. He thought the church was also medicalizing,
Mhm.
except they would call it sin
Right.
instead of a disease. And but these ars eroticas, they were about what he called profound pleasure. And in this case, even if you became celibate, ostensibly, if you were following bliss, it was an ars erotica. They were only interested in the more profound, the deeper profundity of the bliss. So Buddha had no sex, but we study him, but
Yeah.
we don't let in the fact that he was 100% teaching about a type of monastic. Not, I wouldn't say all these. This is where I get into trouble. You can't. I have to use the words that are already out there, and they're all tainted.
Yeah.
So monasticism doesn't work. Celibacy definitely doesn't translate properly. So a lot of my book, what Brahmacharya, was the Sanskrit term, or Urdhvareta, which is the core term in advanced spiritual intimacy. Nobody has even heard of it, except it's, in my opinion, more important than the word Kundalini, which has finally made its way, over the last 30, 40 years into, it's even on TV shows. So this Urdhvaretas, you start to you need that word. It means the full blossoming
Yeah.
of the potential of the human being. And that culminates in puberties. This is the really wild thing. It takes a whole podcast usually to talk about it.
Mhm.
But a puberty of the pineal and hypothalamus in the
Yeah.
brain. And that's where Kundalini is aiming for. And then the eros completely changes. The spirituality becomes 100% embodied. There's nothing subtle about it. You do develop creative powers, which
Mhm.
I've manifested in my profession. I mean, I did many different things. I created, co-founded the largest green project in America, a first of its kind, Green City Lofts in the late 90s, before green was even really known.
Yeah.
You could, and I had a band for 20 years. Yeah, president of ATP, uh, uh, suicidal clients, homicidal, all these things. And I chalk it up to, yeah, that I had lived this ars erotica
Right. And that there
realization.
was a level
Yeah.
there was a level of productivity that you were able to access through that. That's what I hear you speaking about as far as the powers go. So can you repeat that word one more time?
The term ars erotica or
Uh,
urdhvaretas. Yeah, the Sanskrit.
Liberatus.
Yeah,
Um,
urdhvaretas. Yeah.
I thought it was beautiful. I was reading the this article that you wrote in 2009. I don't have it pulled up here. That the language that you were using, it was clear that you were doing the 75% unknown language, unknown content was being put into this article that you did for ATP, and it spoke about the maturation process of the Kundalini. And so, are you saying what I understand you saying also the word celibacy does not work because there is a eros an erotic, an eros-esque experience, sexual in flavor experience that is happening through a person, that is going through those experiences, or having a deep investment in their spiritual practice, the way that Buddha would clearly have. So this maturation process of Kundalini, that birthing of things, do you see the productivity? Do you see the parallels of its flow? It's being in a flow with what, how does that land, or where does that go for you?
Uh, I think this is what to follow the threads of what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The first, maybe getting in a little more concrete, mitosis.
Yeah.
Mitosis is the cellular division that keeps our bodies reproducing itself
Right.
to the quantity, the magnitude of 4.8 million cell divisions per second.
Wow.
So that when we say the living body, that's a good numerical benchmark. Is
Mm-hmm.
if we were interested. And like I say, I look for where people they talk about metaphorically we being embodied and all this, but they really don't come to grips with, well, what is that supposed to mean? They
Mm-hmm.
leave it vague to my ear. I don't think it's any. You lose all vagary if you deal with the phenomenon of cellular mitosis.
Mm-hmm.
You stop that, and people die. You have it continue on, and even it will continue after your last breath and last heartbeat. But if you want to talk about embodied vitality, mitosis is a good thing to not exclude, although it's completely excluded. They talk about the breath. The meditation on the breath is very popular because it's non-threatening. You can meditate on your breath. But the idea of meditating on mitosis, on the cellular divisions per second, zero in 50 or 60 years of transpersonal or any meditative research.
Mm-hmm.
But what this gets into is an eroticism, because
Mm-hmm.
cell division, now you have to think about that for a second. What the heck is cell division?
Mm-hmm.
It's cells reproducing themselves. Okay, now what? Now you have to get fertility back into the concept of sexuality. Well,
Yeah.
what happened to it? Well, the pill. In the 60s, 70s, the pill came about, first time in human history. You could totally, really try to get fertility out of the equation, which in my opinion, that's what I just published on, is it ruins it ruins our world. It
Mm-hmm.
ruins the male, female, or even the non-binary people. It by draining out the whole concept and reality of fertility from eros.
Mm-hmm.
Big mistake. Modern, big mistake, never done before. The pagan fertility cults, which had their own eros, they were called fertility cults for a reason. The eroticism was based in the fertility.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of taking an estrogen suppressing pill so you could have intercourse more is insane.
Yeah.
Why feminism had to take that up as one of its founding principles is the contraception is only because they didn't know what I'm now talking about, what
Mm-hmm.
you're asking about, is that there's an eroticism. Foucault talked about it, the pagan fertility cults, the tantric people, and one of the beginning ways of talking about it is to reclaim ongoing intercourse in every freaking cell. You said I could use foul language. Every cell is fucking itself.
Yeah,
You know,
frickin' wasn't really
wasn't going to work
wasn't
anymore.
too tough. But yeah, every cell fucking itself, every cell having that integrative intercourse dance of an experience. I thought is really beautiful. When I was reading, you speak about or when you were writing about mitosis in this article, there was I was really fascinated with the Kundalini as the meta DNA. That sounded really fascinating to me, and I did see this ongoing cellular dance that was happening. Is that true for you? A dance?
Yeah. It's a dance like a peacock, a male and female. All the animals,
Sure.
they
Yeah.
dance and flirt with each other. Yeah,
Yeah.
the cells are doing this. The DNA is dividing. It's spindling. Yeah,
Hmm.
but we're subjectivizing it. We're making it a felt experience.
Yeah.
Now I didn't even get to meiosis,
Mm.
which is the generation of ovulation, spermatogenesis.
Right.
Uh, so that's another more complex topic. But yeah, that you can feel it. And my yoga for 50 years, the 50 years since like 72 actually, was a meditation on DNA
Hmm.
called retas, urdhva retas. Retas is seed force, or we would call it DNA. And
Hmm.
that's eternal. DNA came from my parents
Yeah.
and their parents and their parents. DNA is goes way back, and it's got the potential. If you have kids, your kids have the potential to have kids, and
Hmm.
they have the potential to have the kids. So DNA is a very profound entry point logically to feeling eternality time, which is another problem. We've gotten obsessed with the word NOW. We love this word NOW, very tunnel vision.
The
This
Power of
now,
Now
yeah,
by
yeah.
Eckhart
It sells
Tolle.
millions of copies. Be here now. This mood, it's a fake now. And Eckhart Tolle has basically recanted. He says, yeah, history, it's a big now. The now doesn't have a beginning or an end. And
Mm-hmm.
so you start to then reclaim something that's bigger than just being in the here and now, which is more, just what's in front of your eyeballs. So DNA, you feel it. You feel, yeah, a part of the evolution of life on the planet.
Hmm.
And you think of it, it's cognitive, because at a feeling level, it just feels like bliss. Like right now, I don't know if you can't see it probably on my camera, but
I
my
see it.
hairs are standing
Yeah.
on end.
Yeah, I see it a little bit. Yeah.
That's because it's a real thing. That was one of the more kind of funny things about my spiritual life
Hmm.
is the things that I wrote about going back decades and read about and got interested in. They started happening.
Yeah.
It's like precursors,
Hmm.
and and this is just one little area because I'm not really talking about the multiple puberties yet. I'm
Yeah.
talking about
People.
processes that we already know about. But you start to feel it, and then yeah, you want to get out of a autistic or self-reference. Oh, I'm so happy. Like I say, the main point was now what is the world is not that happy. And so, yeah, Words from the Soul, just in terms of that book, that got me flown to Slovenia secretly. I didn't even know what was going on. A professor there at the University of Ljubljana invited me, so I end up there. And this was right after 9/11. This is a very ambiguous time. And after I give my talks, they take me way out into the forest somewhere in this long car ride. And I'm talking with this older gentleman, and he turns out to be the chair of unaligned nations of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Janis Drnovshek. They didn't tell me who he was, but he had been clued into Words from the Soul, and it talks heavily about forgiveness
Yeah.
and the challenges of forgiveness. Yeah, not only compliments, but the challenge. And he was presiding over the post-Bosnian War era
Hmm.
of Slovenia and Yugoslavia, that area. And he was very interested in what I had to say about forgiveness. But the point I'm making is, yeah, I'm talking about meiosis and all this, some seemingly not exactly abstract, but theoretical modifications of our theory of eros and
Hmm.
getting fertility back into it. And it kind of there's a lot more I could keep saying on that line alone. But what I'm now coming back to is that this interests me. I published heavily on it, but what was getting back to our shared interest, it should make a difference in the world where it's the worst. So here I am talking to this guy who's presiding over a post-war zone. There were tanks in the street when I arrived,
Hmm.
and he wants me to teach him about forgiveness. Now I don't know any of my colleagues. I don't know. Maybe Ken Wilber has been flown into war zones. He's endorsed my books,
Yeah.
so I don't know how far he has left his teaching chair to go into these places. But man, you feel a different grip
Yeah.
when you are with somebody who's countrymen millions have been slaughtered in a Holocaust type environment. They had death camps there. They were starving people to death. The Muslims were killing off different groups of each other. And I got flown into that environment to meet with the president. He was also the president of Slovenia. So I take that just as an example. It's a wonderful story, but just to keep it streamlined, is if I hadn't had that happen, in my life, I would have felt like I missed the point. Oh yeah, mitosis. I can talk with podcasts about mitosis, and isn't it interesting? Can I talk someone out of killing another human being successfully? Can I talk them out of killing themselves? Can I talk someone out of being psychotic and have an actual life without going into a mental hospital and staying off medication their whole life? Can I be that credible that I'm secretly flown to Slovenia? Can I be that credible to get the Dalai Lama to support my conference on world family, which I did in 2008? I had a huge conference. I think Stephen was there, Stephen Schmidt, and I'm getting endorsements, or the head of the Indian FBI did my security. So what I'm really pointing to is a type of credibility. These people aren't that interested particularly in Urd Veritas or higher states of consciousness, but they see other aspects of my credibility, which, yeah, I believe it came from, and I hope people do take it up. They came from a very 50-year intensive spiritual practice. The focus was not the breath, it was the respect of incarnated life, of fertility. And people would have to scratch their heads. How do you do that? We'll leave that for another time.
Yeah. Do you see the writing as a part of, do you see the writing as a part of that transformation, that practice? Was that a part of your deepening into the practices that you were already doing?
Yeah, I would say, talking to your audience, there's a range of things you can choose to write about.
Yeah.
And you can write into the current marketplace, and you will probably get a career that will start being helped pretty immediately. But the things that I wrote about, the things I did, I was the first person to get yoga and meditation into a prison in 1976.
Wow.
People don't even know that I did that. They take credit for doing it in 1990 or 2000. So they don't know. So I did lots of things, and getting in terms of books. Yeah, I picked topics that I would say 20 years later, for most of them, the world is like, there's 300 million people practicing yoga in the world now. It's an $80 billion a year industry. I can now say the Kundalini is real. Back in the day when I was writing, nobody, what? They'd scratch your heads. So I did choose to write things. And a person like me depends on that there are good historians in the field, like yourself, I think. Someone who can track back and see who really did open doors. Charles Tart opened doors. Yeah, he invented the concept of altered states almost single-handedly.
I have books from Charles Tart's library collection. Like his library name is on it. Like, this is the library of Charles Tart. I have some really incredible historical books. I have a book that was written for Anthony Sudich. It was gifted to Anthony Sudich. So that I do love the history, and I love giving credit where credit is due. I think it's really beautiful, all the things that you've done, and I like what you're saying here. Could you share a story that I heard? I heard you speak about at an Iritos conference. I watched the video on YouTube, and you, I think that there's a parallel with forgiveness. It's connected here. Can you speak about the gifting of children's photos?
Oh, that story. Yeah, this is a real life situation. This was Camp David Accords, which was, I think, 1976 or 7. This was a very big problem. This was part of the 5,000-year animosity between Arabs and Jews. They've been killing each other off for a long, long time. And so this was I think it was an Egyptian-Israeli war that was going on. And Jimmy Carter was the American president. And I think we might easily agree that he was special. He was a real Christian, if I can say it that way. And he convened a meeting at Camp David, which is, a retreat related to government meetings near Washington. And Anwar Sadat was invited, who was the president of Egypt,
Mhm.
and Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister, I think, of Israel.
Just
And
really-
so and there's a war going on. These are situations that I think if we're going to claim to have power that's worth recognition, we should doing be better at certain things than our colleagues.
Yes.
So Jimmy Carter, what he did was, and I'll get to it right now. This is an example and it comes from my interest in fertility, as I'll now show you. Um, they weren't doing very well in this meeting. I mean, you can't control 10 million people on each side from not shooting and killing each other. Very hard. It's not like a couples therapy.
Yeah.
So it's a very challenging problem. And so they were, and they're enemies, So after a number of days, they're going to go home fruitless. And Jimmy Carter's talking with one of his helpers, one of his administrative helpers, and they come up with this idea to give child photos, to get signatures or autographs, we could say, by each of these famous people, and he would take it to little Amy Carter, and that he's got a signed photo from the president of Egypt and so on.
Mhm.
So Carter goes to I don't remember who was first, but let's say he goes to Begin's apartment, abode there, and says, would you sign a photo of your, for my daughter?
Mhm.
And he was a clever man, and the way he probably presented it was lent itself that Begin broke into tears immediately. This is all I ever needed to know.
Yeah.
And my whole career of psychotherapy is I have a number of other stories like this.
Mhm.
I don't, the rest of the Kohut or Freud or Fritz Perls, these people were very minimal. They were peripheral to my interest.
Mhm.
I like to see where something amazing happened that was like earth shaking. And
Yeah.
so what happened was in this case, and there's other stories, like I say, I could tell you about, but they're all the same. He's looking at this photo, and instead of being angry and all fretful and frustrated, he's going home and there's nothing happened. He starts breaking out in tears. And then he looks at Carter, and the way the story is, they were two grandpas suddenly.
Yeah.
They were not presidents of different countries and so on. And they had their grandchildren. So this is fertility. Fertility is not some abstraction. It's if you're a parent, if you're a child, we're all the child of some parents. That just as an aside, Freud ruined all that whole world by pathologizing the family. He should have glorified the family and yeah, found the sparks of beauty in it, but he did not. And so we don't have it for the last 100 years. We have people like Ram Dass calling family life a melodrama
Mhm.
until he met his child. He has an adult child. Then
Yeah.
he changed his mind. He said, "Oh, children are beautiful." So what happened at Camp David was Begin breaks down in tears and he's saying, "My God, we're killing each other's children, aren't we?"
Mhm.
And Carter said, "It's horrible." And then he did the same thing with Anwar Sadat, who also a special guy, and the same thing happened. That they had this, I would call it awakening or an enlightenment. It's a
Mhm.
pretty simple enlightenment. And every parent that had a child born, they were in awe of what just happened.
Yeah.
And thereby, most humans are the peak experience for their parent, not what they dislike and all these horrible narratives about parent-child relations. We were the source of most religious experience of most of our parents' lives.
Mhm.
So that was shared by Begin, Sadat, and Carter, that here they were killing each other's grandchildren and children, and they had the ability to stop it. And a 5,000-year history of it doesn't seem possible, but that is exactly what happened. That is exactly what did, and it's to this day, Egypt, let my people go, the Pharaoh. This goes back 5,000 plus years ago. Moses, let my people go. They're not happy with each other, but baby pictures shared to the point of tears awakened exactly what I'm getting at. Mitosis, 4.8 million cells per second. Wake up to your actual life. Wake up to what fertility is. You will be enlightened. This is the enlightenment that's embodied. And it big time it took place when Carter joined the two warring presidents, and they wept in tears about the nature of something so right near at hand is their grandpas. And they said, fuck it, we're going to make a peace treaty. They launched in billions of dollars of different security measures. And to this day, it's a freak of the Middle East. How come? Nobody asks that question. That's another tragedy, is we don't study these success stories, whether it's in psychology, about how love works, very little interest I found, even in my career. That's why I'm glad to pass on, inspire, because generations can compete with each other, and so it's hard to make your way in your own. But yeah, I become a little bit of a lens now. I want to inspire a lot of people to do what I did. And the stories, yeah, of what I'm sharing is, yeah, the goodness of fertility that was in that story. I told it at this major conference that I convened in India in 2008. Yeah, the Dalai Lama's office was a co-sponsor. That's very hard to get because you have your integrity has to be so high. They don't want to be with somebody who's going to mess up later in life. Sri Ravi Shankar was involved. He's the #1 guru in America. Robert Thurman, Jack Kornfield gave, everybody wanted to be in my conference. Like I said, the head of the Indian FBI did my security. So in that mood, yeah, I told this story because you only have like 5-10 minutes to do, opening ceremonies.
Yeah.
I said, it was on World Family, and there were 400 people from 40 countries. I said, this is how I'm going to use the time. I'm going to tell you one of the most important spiritual moments in the last 50 years at a geopolitical level, which is baby pictures.
Yeah.
And you still don't find people picking up on it. People should be writing books, dissertations, Sophia University. How much more impact do you need than what happened with baby pictures? There is no interest because eventually it starts to erode our current dominant theory of eroticism. Because I don't think you can get into this dimension of fertility. You think, oh, I'm going to become Catholic. No, because there's an even more advanced level that I haven't even talked with you about, of a type of tantra where it all comes together. But before that, opening up those topics is, yeah, you have to get in touch with fertility and the preciousness of life. Of course, that the abortion debate, everybody's going to throw up their arms because they're all caught at a lower level of discourse. I'll just say one word because your audience deserves it. Where am I leaving you hanging? Coentheogenesis. That's my most recent publication. Coentheogenesis. I won't get into it right now, but that solves the abortion, pro-life. That ends that problem of pro-life, pro-choice.
Wow. I mean, I'm incredibly inspired in this moment. I am sure that you inspired amazingly influential people at that conference that you were able to host. And what would it be like if Ukraine and Russia and China could share baby pictures? What would it be like? It seems interesting. Like towards the end, a thought came into my mind about, well, baby pictures are sort of hidden. We sort of we don't want to share our, oh no, mom, put those baby pictures away. And so often, like how would our lives be different if our streets have baby pictures, like a constant reminder of the fragility and the beauty of human life being birthed all the time, constantly birthed. Your body is constantly in a birthing of cellular division, and that might as well be the metaphorical baby picture that is always being shown, and we forget about all of the most beautiful things about our spiritual experiences. Another thing that really caught my attention was that we are the source of the most spiritual experiences of our parents. Wow. You are the source of the maybe the richest spiritual experience of your mother and father, and I hope that inspires people to have more children. It inspires people to really be reminded of just how beautiful this birthing process is. It's really wonderful. I think you're absolutely inspirational the way that you're talking about all of these things. I wonder about my personal interest is around like our agency in birthing things into the world. The sort of idea that everything is a birthing process, and this Kundalini energy, like is this meta energy, this metaphysical force, it seems like when I was reading your writing, it seems like society, the social constructs are keeping us from being it's kind of keeping the Kundalini energy from doing what it is already intent on doing, which is expressing itself through the awakening of the individual. Do you see that as well? Societal constructs kind of holding us down, holding us from being able to do that. Is that also kind of the soil that the seed pops through? I've spoken about that before. That we need that bit of adversity in order to have the strength. The butterfly having the strength to open out of the cocoon needs the cocoon. It cannot be opened early. So maybe it just goes hand in hand. We need those things. But what is the and we talked about like the flow, the kind of the result of having these awakened Kundalini experiences, having more productivity in your life as one of the characteristics of an actualized life. Where do you think all of that kind of integrates or kind of weaves together?
Well, let me introduce a word that's been around to our conversation, Siddhi, Siddhi. Uh, you
Yeah,
know, your audience may have heard it as powers, psychic powers, but
sure.
it really gets to it. I think with the point you're getting at, yeah. In the text, they talk about things like flying and so on, but I'm more focused on the ability to make things happen that the world can't believe is possible, like preventing a murder by admiring somebody for a year, or keeping them out of mental hospital, or all these different things that I've had a chance, creating a $34 million green project,
Mhm.
when nobody knows what green is. So this breaking of new ground requires Siddhi. What does that mean? Confidence, commitment. If what you don't know, then you're committed. You have to learn about it. I was not in property development. I was not a business person, and I had to learn how do you deal with business situations where people are suing each other, and you're fighting. You've got to make allies in Oakland City Hall so that they will make your plans. Approve your plans, and then they want more fireproofing. All this detail. I had to learn about it, not just Wittgenstein and the linguistics of suicide, or how our theories of gender are completely off, or how our theory of eroticism uh, perpetuates abortion and makes you have to want it. While there are other theories where you can love all your conceptions and have them all be conscious. Because of the kind of sexuality that you're having, all your conceptions are going to be conscious and intended. What? Okay, so all of that um, new thinking
Mhm.
is traces back, in my belief, combination of things, but uh, uh, some type of energetic awakening that I tended to for decades, between 4 and 7 in the morning, because that's when the sun, you want to get up and get up before sunrise. All the details mattered.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, there aren't that many people doing yoga today, even there's 300 million. I don't know how many. And then they were practicing this fertility worship, brahmacharya, very rare. That's why I was so respected in India. Brahmacharya, it's the acid test between serious and lay person interest in meditation or yoga. And so, yeah, I did all these things. And yeah, Sydney's got awakened. I could have confidence. It was hard work. I had panic attacks plenty of times because I didn't have any money to produce some of these big things.
Mhm.
And you have to have money. Now people give me money because they recognize what I did. But
Mhm.
for your students and listeners, yeah, you have to have, I believe, you find a problem that really needs help, find a solution that's better than anything out there, that's cheaper and more effective and more simpler, and keep creating what does work. I found, yeah, just to get to a funny point about the compliment giving, because you said it's really hard to learn how to receive. I found out it's very easy if
Mhm.
I just have the person say, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
But no therapist was saying, well, you can say thank you for saying that,
Mhm.
and I would say that, yeah, that's it. You don't own your left arm,
Yeah.
you don't have to feel like you're going to sell out if you say thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
You can just say it. And then the other person, this is even more kind of quirky. I require that they say you're very welcome.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how many divorces I thwarted by having people say thank you and you're welcome. Oh, you just had an affair. Yes, I did. Well, thank you for telling me. You're very welcome. And people are laughing while they're fuming under their breath because they're saying thank you and you're welcome while they're talking about this, disastrous things. So I'm sort of being a shotgun effect, but let me come back to the core is, yeah, your brain gets so activated
Mhm.
um, could be called Kundalini. There's another term I should introduce, Avandana, Avandhana. Nobody knows about it. I've presented this many times. Avandana is enlightenment of the intellect.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to hear about it because the whole discourse of transpersonal and pop psychology about enlightenment is getting beyond the thinking mind. Avandana is a well-established tradition with its practices of an enlightenment, of the ability to use language, of the ability to remember things,
Mhm.
the ability to make associations, to an untold level. Like I say, it's just another example. What I like to do is everybody's over here talking about this, and they can't be bothered with things they don't already know.
Mhm.
So their mind, yeah, be here now, and be beyond thought. People love it. There's Facebook, places like this. That's all you see on the little memes. But
Yeah.
Avandana, and then they scratch their head. Sovatsky must be lying.
Mhm.
I never heard of it. If he's the only one, he can't be telling the truth. In India, they don't give me that problem, but in America, they do. If you look up Dr. R. Ganesh,
Right.
he's the leading guru, you could say, of Avandana. He can carry on 100 conversations with 100 different people for 3 days, I think without rest,
Mhm.
in 4 or 5 different languages. And he can be constantly interrupt, so he's forced to jump around. A
Mhm.
hundred people is a lot. That's a room full of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when he comes back, he remembers where he was at in every disrupted conversation.
Wow.
Now, you want to tell me that that doesn't deserve our attention
Yeah.
because it's not thought free? Or do you want to wake up and go, man, your generation you should be rebelling against what my generation and in between generation did. They were arrogant. They pretended like they knew everything and they want to make money and they sold. They've got a little, a basket of beads like the Native Americans were sold out on Manhattan Island. They got a little bit. They started marketing and researching all that. And anything that was different, like a Vandana, you don't hear about it. So
Mhm.
Vandana is and what this Arganesh mastered physics, chemistry, poetry, like 8 or 9 languages, computer science, Greek mythology, in like a 3 or 4 or 5 year period.
Wow.
We should be interested in him.
Yeah.
I presented this topic because I was a trustee at California Institute of Integral Studies for like, I don't remember, is it 20 years? Some huge amount of time. I just was there all the time. And I
Mhm.
said, we should, we're a graduate school. We should be interested in this type of meditation and enlightenment because we're interested in the intellect. You should fly to America and change, broaden what academia is even about.
Yeah.
Even there, that goes in one ear, not the other. But so I bring it up again for your generation to not let things just because you never heard of it before. And
Mhm.
I've been preaching or teaching about this, yeah, all over the world, and it's time to take a look.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what about Dr. Arganesh? What is it about his methodology that gives this experience? Can you say the word again? I'm not really great with the Sanskrit terminology, and you are amazing in the ways that you write about these words. I love all of the terms that you're bringing up now. I hope my listeners are writing this down, our audience here. So, what was that term again, and what is it about Dr. Arganesh's methodology? What is the meditation about? What is it related to Kundalini? How is it related to Kundalini?
Right, that's a good question. The term is Avandhana. So
Uh,
if you can replay the tape, you can
yeah.
get Avandhana. And it's basically like memory, the ability to get your intellect. And that's kind of it, is you're letting the fact of association become very powerful.
Yeah.
And you start to feel or learn through this associates with that, and that associates with this.
Mhm.
And your mind starts to expand. Indra's net is another metaphor for what I'm now talking about. That
Mhm.
the mind is, or I should say, cognitive mind, the knowing, learning mind, is it builds itself upon association.
Sure.
And so when you awaken that mood, like mimetics, where that's a common thing. You want to memorize something, so you find something it rhymes with.
Mhm.
You tell yourself,
Yeah.
afferent, afferent. I don't know if you had to learn that. Efferent nervous system, meph and saph, motor efferent and sensory afferent. There's little tools, the mimetics, but this is bigger than that, but not dissimilar.
Mhm. I think of the three principles of memory. The father of memory, the father of learning, repetition, just again, 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 again. The mother to be the child is association, and the mother to be like the affect of it, the impression of it, the emotional experience of it. So with that memory, if you're really trying to remember it, what the emotional experience, the emotional impact, that mother of the memory, the child, the association, associating it to really quite abstract things at times, if that helps lock it in for you. And then repetition, doing it over and over again, of course, it's helpful. But can you say more about, like, what is the practice that this, like, what is the so I one of my questions that I had for you is about your transformative experiences, transformative practices, things that have been the most impactful for you in your life. Um and I do have that as sort of like maybe a following question, but maybe this question leads into that one. So how is he helping? How is Dr. Arganesh helping others? How would one help others have an awakened intellect? just through a meditation practice of some sort.
Well, there's another direction that I have to go in,
Okay.
which would be, let's call it feminine or into the body. Because what I was talking about is logic and how things associate.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not only that, but you get a little flavor on a short podcast of that direction. Now, this other direction is into sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you get back to the 4.8 million divisions per second that's happening every single second.
Yeah.
And nobody's paying attention to it. Where DNA, which has got all the knowledge of creating life and sustaining life, nobody's subjectifying. Oh yeah, there was some. I can't remember the name of the book. The book about the serpent and the double helix. Somebody did write a book about
Yeah.
double helix and Kundalini. But yeah, getting more and more into that's what I did. And you start to, feel the difference between source and manifestation,
Mm-hmm.
between method and what method for, you know. So you can get caught up in psychoanalysis or behaviorism or whatever, but what's the goal? And sometimes the goal is just more psychoanalysis. So so getting into a meditation on your own DNA,
Mm-hmm.
you get it closer to source, and then that's the knowledge is already in the cells. You don't have to learn about it, and so this is more. I think of it on the feminine side. It's intuition. It's stuff you think you already know.
Mm-hmm.
It needs verification. There's too much belief in intuition, and sometimes it's not right. We want to be aware of that. But on the other hand, going into this intuitive, bodily felt world that always stops, even in feminism, because of the deal they made with contraceptives and abortion to keep their lives from making babies, so they could create their careers. All of that. This I have to have a different starting point, getting into the physicality of DNA and the knowledge that's already in there, and not just knowledge, but it's precious. Like the baby pictures of Sadat and Begin and Jimmy Carter, you don't just be aware of it, you're in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very crucial element called bhakti. Bhakti is another way underappreciated form of meditation. It's on feeling, not the breath, not necessarily fertility, like what I was saying. Feelings like sorrow, like longing, like love, like missing, and they have a huge amount to say in the traditions of bhakti yoga about emotionality, none of which has been of much interest in transpersonal psychology or the clinical, which is a lot to do with people's emotional lives.
Yeah.
So when you get into the mood of feeling your own DNA, you cry because you can't explain it. It's like God or something, but it's God goddess. It's male female, and this breaks all the ways we even define the ways we define gender as identities. The
Yeah.
big thing going on now is all these new and each one should have its space to be free to
Yeah.
be itself. Well, that whole project, in my view, is doomed. It's wrong. Not only doomed. We are not. A gender is not about what one is. It's an interactivity with how one relates.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to get back. One more problem is it's all the gender issues. They're all trapped in the Freudian modern Darwinian model that teen puberty is the end of our maturation.
Yeah.
That's what Freud said. The fifth stage is the genital stage. And Darwin said evolution's based on reproductive success of the fertility. But the pineal and the hypothalamus has its own puberty. This is off the charts. This is a whole other podcast where the brain is creating it's creating LSD. We don't have any we like LSD, we're into these medicines and ayahuasca, but they're not tracking rasayana, which is the yoga of the hormones of the body, and bhakti, the meditation on the feeling states, and in which, yeah, your practice is to revive everything I've been saying
Mm-hmm.
and let go of what's different from it
Hmm.
And then you start to be, and you go, oh, this is the real body.
Hmm.
It's not a Freudian body. It's the one that's reproducing itself all the time. It's a sexual, but there's also love.
Hmm.
And we get the love back in, the fertility and reverence.
Yeah.
And then it starts to generate different hormonal chemistries,
It,
testosterone, estrogen. We talk about male and female hormones,
mhm.
but they're constantly combining and interacting with each other. The
It,
biggest culmination is in my writings on co-entheogenesis, and this is one of hundreds of possibilities. But kissing, and kissing, when the body is matured in all these different ways I'm describing, between two people who kind of love each other, let's say,
mhm.
and then they start living in the body and cultivating the body the way that I'm talking, and then they realize their partner is the other half of the universe, is a fertility that they have ancestors go back 1,000 generations, or potentially forward to great 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 grandchildren, and
Mhm.
you're in this moment with each other, and you start to worship each other. This is what fertility cults were about. The first religions were fertility cults. They were worshiping. Why? It makes sense. You worship the source of life.
Mhm.
It's not much deeper you can go, but to worship the source from which you came. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is salivation. Salivation, we already know there's a hormone called salivary immunoglobulin A. It's been stumbled upon in meditative studies. Heart Math Institute was early on that when those levels go up, we feel compassion and empathy, and we lose our senses of aggression
Mhm.
when that hormone goes up. And so, what does this start to mean? This is real tantra, or erotic tantra. This is the one that doesn't require contraceptives or abortions or all that garbage. It's all based on free flowing fertility now in the brain, now causing ejaculation, if you can say it
Mhm.
that way, in the pineal and hypothalamus of Madhu. They call it not saliva or oxytocin or salivary immunoglobulin A, called Madhu, meaning honey. Kisses sweeter than wine. You start getting high off of each other. No one has mapped this out.
Yeah.
When I talked to John Wellwood about this,
Mhm.
my living room, I don't know what year that was, 2000 something, he went, oh my God, yeah, bypass is really weakening. There's way levels that we haven't even gotten to. And I said, yeah, this is what I suffer with. Is you're operating with like pretending to know all about the spiritual and the Indian models,
Yeah.
and you don't know very much at all. And so it comes down to this one situation of lovers kissing each other, and their salivations are shared, called wet kissing. It's not a brand new thing at all. But
Mhm.
when you elevate it the way I'm describing,
Mhm.
you're like taking in mushrooms from each other's secretions. And
Yeah.
you look at each other, you go, why didn't you tell me you were God? Why
Mhm.
didn't you tell me you were the source of life? And
Mhm.
now the fertility really makes sense. It's not like you have to run out and have babies, but it's in the potential of every DNA molecule in the body that no one will talk about.
Yeah.
No one will bring it to bear into the couple's relationship, or the young lovers relationship. And it's something as simple as French kissing.
Mhm.
And this is just the beginning, because lingual, you know the word lingual, right? It's a Sanskrit word. Lingual is tongue.
Mhm.
Lingam is the Sanskrit word. There's a phallic overlap.
Mhm.
And this is beginning of a whole other topic of redoing the X-rated world. The
Yeah.
X-rated world is another travesty. It's another ruination of an area that has to be completely uplifted and redone so that it becomes sacred. But you have to have these brains, or whole systems, really, the whole spinal Kundalini flowing up and down, all these things, so that your brain is secreting the hormones of awe, the hormones of high level fertility, follicle stimulating, all these different hormones are, and you're sharing them with a partner, and you're weeping in ecstasy about what a male is shareable with a female, with a male, with a female, back and forth. And it all is permeated by fertility. And you can't have contraceptives. You can't even be thinking like that. And
Mhm.
you can't be championing abortions. But until you get to what I'm talking about, you're going to need all that stuff,
Mhm.
because people use sex, the teenage level of intercourse sex, They use it. Even now, they have a little bit about delaying the male ejaculation. David Dita, who knows very little about what he's talking about, but at least he's making a case about the ability to delay ejaculation for a few hours. But
Yeah.
he doesn't understand it. What is it all? What is that all about? It's not the prostate is homologous to the womb
Mm-hmm.
when the embryo is developing, like the clitoris and the penis are, and we have nipples. There's a lot of homologs,
Right.
meaning organs that are this have remnants in each other,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what gender you end up at. And so the prostate, David doesn't know about this, so he can't say much. But the prostate is not just about a whole, delaying orgasm so that your partner can have, many orgasms and you can be like what does he call it? The superior man.
Yeah.
That kind of language, I can see, okay, that's where you're coming from. But this is much deeper. You're maturing all these fertility essences,
Yeah.
and then they enter into the bloodstream, and then they're shared, not just kissing, but let me just stay with that. It's a
Yeah.
huge topic. Let's say 100 books worth, a
Mm-hmm.
1,000 books worth.
Yeah.
So we're just doing a little tiny speck
Yeah.
and kissing, holding of the sperm, which he has not a clue of what he's really talking about. He's
Yeah.
just interested in the superior man that you can, have girlfriends that will be amazed at your I guess it's longevity in sex, but
Long.
it's really the chemistry in the body, and it becomes entheogenic. So when you're kissing this way,
Mm-hmm.
it's superior. You get it. Everything works.
Yeah.
And there's many other forms besides the kissing, and that frees up intercourse. So it's like the Catholics sort of teach, at least heterosexually. And there's more I could tell you. I just
Yeah.
don't like to leave things hanging, but I can't say it all. And then you
Yeah.
start to have the biggest thing of all babies are conceived consciously as miracles. Couples are weeping about the creation of life. They're not fearing the pregnancy test coming back positive. They're not championing abortion because you don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
The trillions of dollars over time is liberated from, and politics, Supreme Court justices no longer have to worry about what side they're on, pro or choice, pro-life, because it's gone. It's like typewriters. Typewriters aren't used hardly at all because they're gone. They've been replaced with computers, laptops. So this is the type of eros, one little area, this type of kissing. You look at each other, you go, this really is better than sex. It's
Mm-hmm.
like LSD is better than Budweiser.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may prefer Budweiser, but most people, they do mushrooms or something. They go, this is a different high. And in fact, transpersonal came out of that those drug experiences. But this is not drug. This is normal brain, not normal. It's matured brain chemistry that's in all of us. That we've been given a lie. We've been told that when you're that the complete maturation is about a teen puberty. That's Darwin. That's Freud. There's the puberty, the hypothalamus, the pineal. Might as well say the thymus, the heart, the whole body, all the cells of the body, to where you can feel their mitosis and the meiosis, the
Yeah.
ovulation cycle, spermatogenesis. We don't even know about it. There's a 48 to 50, 60-day male version of ovulation.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody even knows about it.
Yeah.
And so you're devaluing men massively, that they don't understand the rhythms. They have them, just that modern science won't look, and where I'm pointing a big light, and more. Yeah, now the science is finally catching up
Yeah.
with everything that I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then you start to have, this awe of each other's fertility, whether it's every cell of the body, and the eros of that,
Yeah.
and the state of consciousness that arises out of this, and then the confidence levels that arise.
Mm-hmm.
Every people are confident that marriage will work. They're
Mm-hmm.
confident that they could be a parent. They don't feel like, oh, I'm not, my parents were no good, so how could I be any better? We've got a huge number of your generation and younger. They don't want kids because they don't think it's possible. That's what Freud's legacy is. You scapegoat the parents and explain all your current problems. Eventually, nobody wants people, a lot of number of people don't want to be parents. I think it's a bad idea. And climate change, might as well at least add in a mention.
Mm-hmm.
When you have this degree of bodily pleasure going on, you don't need to overuse the environment.
Mm-hmm.
I live in the middle of a national forest. I live on a dirt road.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy
Yeah.
because all this has happened in my body and anyone else's body that does this
Mm-hmm.
type of meditation. And so in that, I don't have to, you have a lot. I don't have a cell phone. You start to not make a big imprint on the environment. Why? Because the economics of pleasure have been changed.
Mm-hmm.
You have added so much, and not just pleasure, meaningful pleasure, the meaning of eternity living in DNA. You feel it. You feel, your parents did the best they could. Your grandparents, you can have Anwar Sadat and Begin warring 1 minute and crying in each other's arms the next minute and ending a war for less 40, 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
You start to see what I'm talking about has got scientific backing. There's geopolitical examples, big time. And yeah, the biggest, I think about the Ukraine war because my heritage is Russian and Ukrainian. My DNA is warring with itself in some way.
Uh,
Is yeah, we need a Nobel Prize, but much more powerful for leaders who bring about these states of unification because the world's filled with errors and conflicts. There's plenty that is not good in Ukraine
yeah.
and Russia is, but you need mediators. In
Mm,
the UN, they're incapable. They're not awake to what I'm describing. This
yeah.
one world family is in your bones. And you can look people like Putin in the eyes or Zelensky and say, I'm going to guide you, or the world is going to look up to you in ways you have never dreamed possible.
Mm,
And you're going to go down like in history up there with Christ. We're not talking about Putin or Zelensky. We're talking about you being up there with, forgive them, they know not what they do.
mm,
And you will be like that, and I will guide this. And you're going to rebuild each other's countries. You're going to no more violence between, people. You're going to show the world something that they didn't know existed. And they'll go, Jesus Christ, if you do that, what more glory could you have? Yeah,
mm,
you make Russia the most worshiped country in the planet because of what you're doing, not through victory with armaments, but by a spiritual stance.
mhm,
And you need a mediator. Right now, we've got the exact opposite. We've
mm,
got them sending weapons and who's going to win and lose. They're stupid. I shouldn't say stupid. They're benighted. They only know what they know.
mm,
And this whole model of human being that I'm describing is like right at our fingertips. And
yeah,
luckily I did have a chance for 50 years to implement it at local levels.
mhm,
I was the first person to get meditation into a lockup
mm,
ever, 1976, and saw that it can work, and yoga and chanting for that matter, and homeless shelters and the lobotomized in Atlantic City. All these things are at the local level.
yeah,
Yeah, if I come back, my incarnation would be in the American Foreign Service,
mm,
because that's the career where you're a family therapist, but
mm,
between countries.
yeah,
And that's where, if you have this magnitude that I'm sharing with you, of in touch with what life is, you can look a Putin in the eye because you know he wants to be a hero. You
mhm,
you don't have to demonize him like the rest of the West does. And you know that Zelensky is trying to defend his people, and
mhm,
he's got kids, and they all have kids. And yeah, you can do this Begin, Sadat, Carter moment and implement it, and you can plan it out 10 billion, $100 billion into advance, because you got to rush in a lot more than just a hard opening moment.
yeah,
You've got to that's where the genius, talk about your students and how to encourage them. You can't stop. You've got to, when I see a client, I think about their children and their children's children.
mhm,
That's always in my mind, that I'm their therapist.
mm,
This marriage is going to stay together. They're going to find unconditional love. They're going to have fun. They're going to go on vacations. They're going to do everything. And their grandchildren are going to come to the grandparents' home in the same home.
mm,
That's all in my mind. So,
mm,
same thing with any problem. You have to think it out, not just the first level of, oh, keep them out of the mental hospital, or, oh, stabilize their emotionality. No, you've got to have a girlfriend someday or a boyfriend, have them be able to work and hold a job, have them be happy. And yeah, maybe one more little thing because I'm kind of on a roll. Facebook. Through Facebook, therapists can be in touch with clients they had 30 and 40 years ago.
Mhm.
And it's amazing. That changed my life. I have people who are my friends on Facebook that, yeah, their lives are completely the opposite of any, if they've gone to any other therapist on the planet,
Yeah.
I think. They weren't hospitalized. They should have been. I would have done it if I met them in the 2000s. This was back in the early 80s and early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, that they're not in hospitals.
Mhm.
I'll tell you one really touching story because it was on my birthday. One of these clients, 26 years in in that person's life. That also is hard to get.
Wow.
Not that many therapists will stay in someone's life for 26 years.
Mhm.
Homeless, just really lots of issues. The person thought there were razor blades on the way to my office.
Mhm.
Hallucinatory razor blades.
Mhm.
Very, very dangerous situation for this person. But we did everything, all these good things. And then 20 some years later, 25 years later, I get a Facebook link. It's of a little boy, like 10-year-old little boy, with a rope around his waist, hanging upside down in some third world country. And like four or five of these old peasant, craggy looking guys are lowering this little boy down a sewer pipe that's vertical into the ground. So that's what you see in the first 10 seconds, 5 seconds of the video. This little kid is being lowered upside down into this pipe. And then they pull him up, and he's pulled up a baby. That, she was saying, that's what you did with me. So I was like 28 years old. She'd call me the boy therapist. I lowered myself into this frickin' pipe and pulled her out of a horrible, horrible place. That's the kind of story I can tell you with full emotionality of at the nitty gritty level. Forget about grand levels of the clinical career. And that, believe me, I had to go to 3 different places because that person kept destroying clinics that I would work in. And I didn't say, well, I had to keep finding new supervisors because they'd say, you got to get, this person's beyond us. And so I would just go find a new supervisor. And so that person finally got what I was doing for them and gave up all their psychotic symptoms.
Wow. You're an incredible human being, Stuart. I really appreciate all of this. That you said so much, and that you're on a roll. You said so much there. I want to say one thing. It sounds like in terms of the awakening of the cities, it seems like there's many avenues, and then there are many rivers that lead to the same ocean, if you will. And then it is maybe through meditation that an awakened experience of knowing the sensation can be possible. And then when that knowledge is known, when it is fully experienced and immersed in it, it's not something that is lost.
Correct.
It's not something that falls away. It's something that you become the parts become integrated in such a way that they become a bigger whole. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. And
uh,
logically, yeah, if you're going to use DNA as a touchstone, it's in every cell. I don't have to prove it.
yeah,
Every conception is a sperm in an ovum of DNA material. Nobody gets here without that, even if
yeah,
it's in a test tube. These are inarguables. Yeah, you start to believe you're operating at that level, and
yeah,
what it takes to get at that level. You got to break a lot of political no-nos.
yeah.
And I would just say, I've done about a few hundred of these podcasts,
Mhm.
and I get revitalized.
Yeah,
I thought I was retiring and working less and yeah, writing less. But I'll tell you, for me to be committed to answering your question, how does this even work?
Yeah.
I've left you with an interesting podcast,
Hmm.
and maybe 1 or 10%, 20% people will chit chat about it, and then they'll chit chat about what they're really interested in and go back to what's 99% out there or 99.9% out there. But maybe there are 5 people or 10 people. And what I'll do, I live in the middle of a forest.
Hmm.
It's easy to rent Airbnbs and come out here and spend a week.
Yeah.
And we'll get, I'm just truncating every topic I'm raising with you.
Yeah.
There's very little back and forth because I've got so much to have to download. But
Yeah.
that would be me coming up in the moment with an existential pledge
Yeah.
that if I mean what I say, I should make a format that's equal to what's required.
Yeah.
And yeah, coming here for a week, living nearby, 6, 8, 7, 8 hour days, a combination of different practices, question and answer, talks, getting, bonding with people.
Yeah.
That would be a way of living up to what you asked me to do, is to
Yeah, I
inspire.
mean, I would love to experience a workshop like that. I would love to experience a retreat like that at that level. You have such a wealth of knowledge that is so important, and I see how learning, knowing, researching about one thing had inspired and it grew these other avenues of knowing. And it's incredibly beautiful. You deserve all of the flowers. Thank you so much, Dr. Stewart. And I just want everybody to be reminded to check out your book, Advanced Spiritual Intimacy. Also, recently, that chapter that you wrote for gender equality and reconciliation. And that I don't know when is that book out right now?
Just a few weeks.
Just a few weeks. So that was recently out. Thank you so much. I feel like we could go on and on. As you said, you have a wealth of information. I would love to learn more from you, and I hope everyone else has learned something new today. I'm sure that they are walking away inspired as well, because there is a lot that still needs to be at the forefront, and I think through the field of transpersonal psychology is the best way to do it. So thank you, Dr. Stewart. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on. Take
Absolutely.
good care, Travis.
Bye.
Make sure to comment, like, subscribe, follow me here, and check out that one and that one. Thanks.